get in that smoke wagon and see what happens. Listen, mister, I'm getting awful tired. I'm getting tired of your guessing. Now jerk that pistol and go to work. I said throw down, boy. Are you going to do something? Or are you just going to stand there and bleed? I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast. This week we're looking back at the 1993 Wyatt Earp movie that isn't called Wyatt Earp. One of the most unashamedly entertaining westerns of modern-ish times, one that, despite its occasional narrative and tonal flaws, is elevated by one of the greatest casts of 90s cinema and home to one of my favourite performances of all time. It might be Kurt Russell's movie, but make no mistake, it's Val Kilmer as the unforgettably pallid Doc Holliday who ultimately steals the show. So, I've been a bit worried about asking this question. I mean, I still love this film, but Rob, what do you think of Tombstone?
Before I get into what I think of Tombstone, I watched Tombstone and Wyatt Earp.
Mm-hmm. You did a double bill.
I did a double bill because I wanted to, because obviously, like Armageddon and Deep Impact, these were two films that were released eerily close together.
Mm-hmm.
And what I will say is Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner,
mm-hmm.
It feels like if you ordered Tombstone off Wish.com.
Oh, that's pretty harsh on.
Like everything is just a little bit worse.
No, I think that's actually fair because Wyatt Earp I don't think it's a bad film, but it is just a little bit worse. I actually rewatching this because I mean, even this movie was famously an absolute mess. The production of this movie was insane. You know, the original director was God, what was his name? The writer, Kevin Jarre.
Kevin Jarre.
He was essentially fired. And then they brought in George P. Costumos, who directed Rambo 2 and Cobra. And of course, with the change comes a change in tone, all these other things, you know, it went over budget. It was a bit of a mess. And I think you can see that on the screen. This film is a little bit schizophrenic, but my God, is it entertaining.
So Kevin Jarre is he's credited but uncredited.
Yeah.
As now only doing the Charlton Heston scenes.
Oh, see, that's a rough sell because, I mean, of all the scenes to do, you know, if you're watching this film and you get told that you're going to get a cameo from Charlton Heston of all people, you're like, oh, this is going to be absolute killer. It turns into one of the oddest and most pointless cameos of all time. Like, I was hoping for like a Wayne's World style Charlton Heston cameo, you know, like Gordon Street. Yeah, I once knew a girl on Gordon Street. That was a long time ago. And the whole joke is the fact that if you want to make an amazing cameo, you get Charlton Heston in. His character shows up, does nothing, looks bored, and then disappears.
Yeah, but I wonder because that was Kevin. So Kevin Jarre started with Charlton Heston, and then he was going to move on to the rest of the film. So they wanted to keep Charlton Heston in, but I wonder if it just didn't have any. And I will answer what I thought of this film. I know I haven't answered.
No worries.
But I wonder if it just didn't have any tonal impact to what George P. I say George P. Cosmatos because there's a rumor, isn't there, that he was just like the
shadow director.
The shadow director for Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell basically directed this film. So,
which I've heard, just to be clear, there are conflicting reports on that. You know, some people say Kurt Russell did a lot. I think Michael Bain said he was never directed by Kurt Russell. He was obviously involved to one extent or another, but as to whether he directed it. But again, it definitely speaks to the mess. Like any movie where nobody's sure who actually directed it means the film's a fucking mess.
You know what this feels like with the two directors and stuff and the different tones? It's Justice League, isn't it?
It does feel a bit, but it as if it was all happening at once. Like, you know, Justice League, you had the director, then he had to step away, and you bring in a new director with a new tone. This feels like, you know, there's nothing planned here. It's kind of like the two directors. And, you know, the director and the writer, Kevin Jarre, they worked together a whole bunch of time. There's a reason there was the handover. So, you know, you're talking about two, I assume, friends who'd worked on Rambo, worked on Cobra, etc. And then suddenly you've got this like passover, and it's got to be strange when because you know, with Justice League, he wasn't fired. Obviously, there was a personal tragedy. Here, the movie wasn't working, and they brought in again, I'm killing his name here, George P. Costumos, to basically save it. What is it?
Cosmatos.
Is it Cosmatos? Oh, sorry, I put the T in the wrong place. I've got Costumos. Well, what is he? Is he like Greek, half Greek, half? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm obviously getting it wrong, and I'll almost certainly get it wrong for the rest of the podcast. You can rely upon that.
Yeah. So, what did I think of the film?
Yes, yeah. Let's get to that.
It's all right, isn't it? I mean, it's not terrible. I'm not going to argue the fact that I like usually. Oh, I hated this film, or it's all right. The one thing I will disagree with you. I don't think Val Kilmer's that good.
Oh, come on now.
I
would have preferred if you had said the movie was shit. Like, that is an absolutely outrageous take. Like, he is so good in this movie.
I don't think he is. Do you know who I think is better? Michael Biehn.
Michael Biehn, I think he's great in this film. But some of his I think he encapsulates the issues I have with this film. You know, I actually think, going back and watching those two films, I think there's somewhere between the slow realism of Wyatt Earp and the popcorn fun of Tombstone lies the truly perfect Wyatt Earp movie. And I don't think either film quite gets it. Like, with this film, I think occasionally the reality of the narrative pushes up against the tone of the movie. You see it with Wyatt and Josephine in particular, which we'll get to in a bit, which I actually think is one of the weakest elements of the film. But you get the fact that sometimes it feels cheesy. And I mentioned earlier the fact that the movie is rather schizophrenic. It's like it doesn't know what kind of movie it wants to be. Is it an action movie? Is it a broad romance, a traditional Western, a revisionist Western? Is it a buddy movie? I've heard some people describe it as a really violent movie. I actually thought it was relatively thoughtful in its bloodletting at times. But I guess the fact of the matter is, it's actually a bit of both. It's a bit of a mess.
Seeing all those mustaches on screen, I thought it was going to end up being a porno movie.
Well, yeah, there are. Well, that came from the director who wanted it to be very true to the time. So it was like no fake mustaches. We're not going to have, to bring it back to Justice League, we're not going to have any issues there with facial hair. This is all going to be legit. And if you've got Sam Elliott in your film, it does put pressure on everyone else to grow some decent whiskers.
If you've got Sam Elliott in your film, everyone is struggling to get a mustache. That dude's handsome, isn't he?
Who?
Sam Elliott.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Everyone's super handsome in this film.
Handsome man.
But that you mentioned Michael Biehn. Michael Biehn is fantastic. But some of the stuff in this film, again, those clashes of tone, like the scene with him and Doc Hollywood, that opening, like when they're at the bar and they start speaking Latin, it's both awesome and cheesy as fuck. Like, it really is. Like, it really, some of the way it's shot actually feels quite heavy-handed. Like, he said, like, that he delivers that first line in Latin, and suddenly, and the director does this a lot. I'm just going to call him the director now. I'm getting super lazy. He really does, like, almost like a crash zoom up into his face, and the music comes in, and it's like, again, at that point, it starts feeling like an old-fashioned Western. And you think of some of the other sequences, like the Curly Bill shooting the sheriff out in the rain after he does Opium. Yeah. That scene is fucking going for it. And whenever if it's dark, this film is really going for it. Like the scene when Bill Paxton, Mort, gets shot, the slow motion of it, the dramatic death, and then the super overwrought scene in the rain when Kurt Russell goes out in the rain. He's like, why? And then they have Josephine on one side and Maddie on the other. I'm like, yeah, dude, I get what you're going for here. I love this film, but some of it feels incredibly clumsy. And
some of it, though, right? You said all these really dramatic scenes, and they all look like, even the one you quoted this morning. I say this morning, the one you quoted at the beginning,
the Billy Bob scene,
that smoke wagon thing, right?
Yeah.
It's so dramatic. He's standing up to this guy who's bullying other people. That guy randomly being Billy Bob Thornton. And not just any Billy Bob Thornton. You look at Billy Bob Thornton's character, what was it, Johnny Tyler?
Yeah.
And tell me that's not a grown-up Cartman from South Park.
It is a little bit the way he delivers his lines. And in fairness, he wasn't actually given any lines. He was just told. Yeah. He ad-libbed all that great, like, Christ almighty. It's like sitting here playing cards with my brother's kids or something. You nerve-wracking sons of bitches. All that was ad-lib, supposedly. He was just told, go up there and be a bully. And it's we mentioned the Charlton Heston cameo. This absolutely blows out the water as far as I'm concerned. I think this is a great cameo. But when this was made, it wasn't really a cameo because he hadn't had his breakout role yet. No. He wasn't particularly famous. He wasn't Billy Bob Thornton.
No, he was just a guy part in this.
He was just a bit part rather than it being a cameo.
You had that intense scene where you got Wyatt Earp standing up against the bully who's got a gun aimed at him, and then you got stupid lines like "skin that smoke wagon."
Oh, I love it.
It's terrible. Like, the only other worse thing is constantly, forever, I'm your Huckleberry.
Oh, dude, you're going to, say, wait, like he's got so many great lines, but that sequence, I actually think, is one of the greatest dressing downs in cinema history. Like, you've got to remember, up until this point, you're aware of Wyatt Earp, but the introduction, again, almost quite cheesy. Everyone's quite happy. He meets his family. And this is the film showing you that he's about, like, this guy's a bully, but the way he just kind of picks him out immediately is like, oh no, this guy's just all talk. And I'm just going to get, like, I can't imagine what it'd be like to have a dressing down like that from another man, where he's not just delivering those lines, but he's slapping him. And I know that the lines are patently almost ridiculous, skin that smoke wagon and see what happens. But as he's doing that, he's slapping him in the face in public. And it's the way he delivers the lines, Kurt Russell, the way he just peers through him. He's got those eyes, hasn't he? And he's just like, yeah. I can't imagine what it'd be like to take a dressing down like that. And it's made even worse when he goes outside and you get that introduction of, well, Doc Holliday's already been introduced in the gambling scene with Sylvester Stallone's brother, no less.
Yes.
What's
it was Sylvester Stallone that turned around to the producers and said, hire George B. Cosmatux.
Yeah. Well, they'd obviously worked together twice, yeah. So Sly's brother is in this film for that opening sequence with Val Kilmer. But when they all get together, him and the three brothers, and Billy Bob Thornton comes out and he's got a shotgun, and it's just the way that they don't even acknowledge the fact that he's there with a shotgun. And then Val Kilmer oh, Johnny, I forgot you were there. You can go now. And he even thank you as he drops the shotgun. I can't believe you're going out that scene. I really think it is one of the most belittling and horrific dress downs I've ever seen on the screen.
Poor Sylvester Stallone's brother. His mum names him Sylvester. What are we going to name the other kid? Frank.
Yeah, Steve.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
It's like, why am I called Sylvester? The people will call you Sly. Yeah, if I'm a movie star, he got lucky. Yeah. But
best scene in this? The best scene in this is Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday playing cards on Doc Holliday's deathbed. Doc Holliday just wants him gone. Wyatt Earp is no, play cards, it's your turn. And he calls him, the line he has with him where he says something like, you're the most bullheaded man ever. Like, feel the emotion between the two of them. And he just, like, he's going to be there for his friend till the end. And that, I think, is fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, that death scene perfectly encapsulates their relationship. And why, let's be clear, the true love story of this movie is between Wyatt and Doc. And that's one of my, I mentioned the fact that this has got one of the best casts of 90s cinema. It's almost like they know it. And, you know, we're coming from one great cast to another in terms of podcast. Last week we did Galaxy Quest, which has got an equally fantastic cast, and another film which gave the opportunity for everyone to have a bit of screen time. Like, they were like, listen, we can't not give these guys a bit of screen time. But what it comes at, the cost of sometimes, is that relationship. It's like, could I deal with just 2 hours of just Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer in this film? Absolutely. But there's something about that scene at the end. There's something about strong men having to face their emotions against their will, which, like, you know, I'm dead inside. But that scene absolutely gets to me. And supposedly Val Kilmer asked, in one of those classic, you know, early 90s Val Kilmer moves, that bed was full of ice. Yeah. Because he wanted to feel uncomfortable and add to his already pallid state. And, you know, whatever he did, it totally worked. Although, like I said, I think all the way through the film, I mean, I mentioned the fact that I wasn't messing around when I said this is one of my favorite performances of all time. And to hear you tear it down is heartbreaking, sir. It's although I will say one more, I won't keep going on about Doc Holliday.
Yes, you will. We'll bring it back every time.
I mean, just to go completely, like, I was amazed that this movie, that he didn't get an Oscar nomination for this film. I was flabbergasted that he wasn't up for Best Supporting Actor. So I had to look back. It's still egregious, but 1993 might have had one of the greatest, like, lineups of Best Supporting Actor of all time. It's an absolute murderer's row. You've got DiCaprio for Eating Gilbert Grape. You got Fiennes for Schindler's List, Tommy Lee Jones for The Fugitive, who went on to win it, John Malkovich for In the Line of Fire, and Pete Postlethwaite for In the Name of the Father. I'm like, God damn. Yeah. Now, like, if ever there was a year where you're like, all right, I'll allow it, it was that fucking year. Although, despite the fact that he's sweating all throughout the entire film, he's as white as a sheet, despite the fact that the tuberculosis is literally killing him on screen, he was up for the most desirable male at the 1993 MTV Movie Awards. So there was that, I guess.
I'll give you a saving grace. I'll throw you a lifeline.
Mm-hmm.
He does have the best Doc Holliday performance out of him and Dennis Quaid.
He does.
Like Dennis Quaid's Doc Holliday performance in Wyatt Earp. And I know it's not the Wyatt Earp podcast or the Wyatt Earp film, but Jesus Christ. Yeah, there's like I said, it feels like it's a wish.com.
It does a little bit, and it just can't be helped, that comparison. I mean, you mentioned it earlier briefly, but this really is one of those weird cinematic anomalies that just keeps popping up. Like, there was Abyss and Leviathan in 89. There was Dante's Peak and Volcano in 97. Armageddon and Deep Impact might be the most famous one from 98. Yeah. There was Olympus Fallen and White House Down in 2013. These things just keep popping up, and these films came out within 6 months of each other, and this movie really did kill the box office for Wyatt Earp. Like, Wyatt Earp, just be clear, is a different movie. It's more about his life. This is about Wyatt Earp's time at Tombstone, as the title would suggest. Whereas that film covered, it really is a early 90s Kevin Costner vehicle. He's coming hot off the heels of Dances with Wolves. He's got all the cash in the world, and then this film ends up flopping. This film actually did quite well at the box office. But you can imagine with most of these films, it's the first out the gate. If you've got two decent movies, and I know it is the Wish.com version. I actually think Wyatt Earp is a perfectly decent film. But
I didn't say it wasn't. I mean,
no, totally.
I've got a lot of things off Wish.com that are perfectly decent. But they're perfectly decent.
They're perfectly Wish.com. Yeah, absolutely.
So you said anomalies, right?
Mm-hmm.
This film has done what a lot of films do. An actor comes along, you recognize this actor. No, you don't recognize. An actor comes along in a film and you go, he had a good performance. Mm-hmm. And then you watch a film from like 30 years ago and you go, fuck me, he's been acting since that long. Stephen Lang. Now, I've known Stephen Lang before, but a lot of people would only know Stephen Lang from Avatar.
Yeah.
Or Don't Breathe, where he's the blind man. And then you look at it and you think, like, fuck me, no, who was he in this? Ike?
Ike's amazing in this film.
He's Ike in this in 93, but before that, I always know him as the party crasher from The Hard Way with James
Of course you do.
And Michael J. Fox.
Yeah,
which is another one we're going to do on this podcast.
Of course we are.
How we haven't done a James Woods film, I don't know. But
yeah, we really should do a James Woods film. I haven't seen Videodrome yet. That'd be a great excuse. I've not. I bought it, but I still haven't watched it yet.
Oh, Videodrome could be a good show. But so Stephen Lang, but it's not just Stephen Lang in this new go. Like, oh my God, the cast of people. I think I said it last week when we did Galaxy Quest, starring Alan Rickman, Tim Allen, Sigourney Weaver, and a host of now famous faces.
Yeah.
You've got Thomas Hayden Church and Michael Rooker. I think fucking Billy Zane is in this.
Oh, how fucking handsome is Billy Zane? I mean, like Powers Booth's character, Curly Bill, he goes out of his way to mention that he might be the most beautiful man he's ever seen. Billy Zane in this film is outrageously in a completely objective way, not in like gay, straight, any of that nonsense, just in an objective, almost like a work of art. He's so fucking handsome, it's ridiculous.
He is super handsome in this film. Like, the only thing I remember Billy Zane doing, was this before or after Sniper? I think this was after Sniper. Sniper was like 91.
I think it was, this is 93, so it's a couple of years after.
The one that I always remember watching and seeing, fuck me, Billy Zane's in that, was Critters.
Oh shit! I totally forgot he was in that.
Yeah, he's in Critters.
Oh, that's another film we have to do. We have to do Critters. We're
doing Critters. We're going
to turn this into the podcast where we talk about other podcasts we're going to do in the future. But yeah, John Corbett was in it. Yeah. There's Jason Priestley pops up. And, the thing is, I was looking at the credits after the film. Bill Paxton is a long way down in the credits for this film. And 93 Bill Paxton's pretty fucking famous. And I don't think it's an issue with Bill Paxton. It's just because there's so many goddamn famous people in this film. And I know we have different opinions on Val Kilmer. I think it speaks to the quality of performances in this film and how good everyone is. And like I said, this film is flawed, but everyone's so good in it that it elevates the material. Bill Paxton is very good at stealing the show, as we both know. Like, popping into films and seeing the show. He's almost forgettable in this film, and he's fine. He's perfectly decent, but he just kind of falls by the wayside almost because everyone else is so fantastic. Yeah. You rarely say that about a film where it's like, God, I can hardly remember Bill Paxton, but yeah, in this film, he does kind of fall by the wayside slightly.
Do you know who else was in this film?
Who's that?
Wyatt Earp.
Why? Yeah, Kurt Russell. Oh, Wyatt Earp. Yeah, Wyatt Earp,
the third, played
that's
Billy
it.
Claiborne.
Yeah, and that's not actually his first name. I think it's something lame like Gary Wyatt Earp, but he conveniently dropped the Gary for this film. He's like, oh, well, my movie name's going to be Wyatt Earp.
Wouldn't you? Like,
100%. You don't want to be Gary Wyatt Earp. You just want to be Wyatt fucking Earp.
I mean, bless him. He didn't do much after this, but I mean, he tried.
Well, he was in some. I mean, that's still pretty cool. I mean, that's going to be the peak. If your name is Wyatt Earp and you were in Wyatt Earp, then that's not bad. Yeah. But I had to ask, right? Because going into this, I have a really odd relationship with Westerns. And it's the only thing I compare it to, for me personally, is my relationship with James Bond. Because with James Bond movies, I started watching them with Timothy Dalton in the late 80s, License to Kill and all that jazz.
Okay.
And since then, I've seen every James Bond film, and I've enjoyed them to one extent or another. But I've never felt the need to go back and watch the movies that have come. But I've seen some of them. I've seen like Dr. No, and I've seen Moonraker and stuff. But I have no relationship really to the Sean Connery films, to the Roger Moore films. I've seen the Lazenby film, but that was almost like, that was years and years later, and like whatever, it was just another movie. And it's odd that I have a similar relationship with Westerns, because if you go back as far as, say, this and Unforgiven, everything since then, I'm really on top of the Western genre. I'm thinking like 3:10 to Yuma, the Magnificent Seven remake, which has an issue similar to this film in that it's got a terrible final line. Yeah. Open Range with Costner and Robert Duvall is totally this underrated classic. Oh, dude, if you take anything from this podcast, go and watch Open Range. It felt like a bit of that to Kevin Costner, to me, felt like his kind of low-key comeback, in the same way that, Robert Downey Jr., everyone talks about Iron Man, but the real comeback was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Bang, yeah.
That was the same thing with Kevin Costner. He was still kind of in the wilderness in the early 2000s. And Open Range came out, and I kept telling people, I was like, dude, you've got to watch this fucking...
That's got Andor as well, hasn't it? Open Range has Andor in it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Luna.
Gabriel Luna.
Thank you. But yeah, I've seen so many Westerns since like 1993, but then I think back to like all the classics. Like, I haven't seen the Sergio Leone films. I've not seen Fistful of Dollars or the John Sturges classics, Magnificent Seven, the original, or the Sam Peckinpah films, The Wild Bunch. I've only recently watched Butch Cassidy and The Outlaw Josie Wells, and even stuff with like Jimmy Stewart and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I've kind of had to force myself and go back, but my relationships with Westerns is all very contemporary-ish now. We have to kind of put that tag on it because we're talking about the 90s. But
so 10 minutes later, what's your question?
Like, sorry, I do apologize. I just wanted to kind of get off my chest, as I always do. But do you have like a relationship with the Western genre? Do you like Westerns? Have you seen loads of them? Like, have you gone back and watched the classics? Or
I can make this easy for you, the same as you. Like, I like a Western film, but I've never gone back to watch. Like, I've never seen the Sergio Leone ones. I tell you the Western I have watched randomly back in the day, because my nan loved it. Paint Your Wagon.
Oh, that is a random one, yeah.
Yeah, the one with Lee Marvin singing Wandering Star, which I could probably do that song now sounding like this.
Yeah, you probably could. I mean, this has got like nods to all those classic Westerns. That opening right at the start of the film with the cowboy shooting at the screen. Yeah. That was from a film from like 1913, one of the earliest Westerns. And supposedly when people saw that in the cinema, they thought they were actually being shot upon. That might be kind of, hyperbole.
Yeah.
But, it goes to show, like, when you think of cinema, like, the Westerns are as old as cinema itself.
The oldest Western I've watched and enjoyed was the original Magnificent Seven.
Which was a remake of Seven Samurai.
That was Seven Samurai.
Yeah, which is a fantastic... But bizarrely, I've seen Seven Samurai, but I've not seen the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, Seven Samurai is fantastic, but the original Magnificent Seven is really good as well. Like,
Brenner,
it's worth a watch. But again, I don't mind. I kind of enjoyed the Denzel Washington remake, but I like a Western. So I do like a Western film. I tell you one you didn't mention, which I absolutely adore, is The Quick and the Dead.
I haven't seen that.
Directed by Sam Raimi. Have you never seen it?
No, I've not seen that.
Oh, dude, Quick and the Dead is great.
Well, there's so many I need to see. I mean, my drop off, and we mentioned this before, with cinema in general, it's almost a similar story. Like, from the 80s onwards, my cinematic kind of over is relatively, I don't want to say impressive, but I've seen a lot of films since I was, the mid 80s onwards. But go back to like 70s, 60s cinema, like I've tried to force myself in the past few years, but for obvious reasons, I just don't have that attachment to those decades of cinema. So from the 50s onwards, I've just not seen much.
When we do the Quick and the Dead on this podcast, when we do it, you'll be having the same conversation about actors. Like fucking Jigsaw from the Saw series, Tobin Bell is in this, is in Quick and the Dead. Young Leonardo DiCaprio was in it. Russell Crowe is in it.
Oh, no, I have seen it. I have seen it.
Yeah.
I have seen it. I'm telling you a fib. I have seen it years and years ago. Like,
we're still doing it
a couple of years after it came out. But
we're still doing it on this podcast. But
we should.
But let's get back to Tombstone.
Well, no, because you were mentioning, it's just one of the issues I had with this film. And like I said, I love this film. It does have issues. And one of the things was that relationship between Josephine and Wyatt, which I feel like all the relationships with females in this film are very rushed. Like the stuff with Maddie, it's so easy to kind of like brush her aside because right from the off, they sell you on the idea that she's a psycho, she's an opium addict. So, and when she goes away on the train, there's no big hoo-ha. She just kind of just disappears. She literally disappears off into the distance. And that whole relationship with Maddie where they meet and they're on their horses and they're talking about them, the scent because they're in heat. It feels so clumsy. Then they basically have a picnic in a glade. It's just like, wait, what fucking film is this from? And then their relationship is forgotten about almost. And then at the end, you have that weird sequence after you mentioned your favorite scene in the film when Doc Hollywood dies.
Yeah.
And it's a gorgeous scene. And then it cuts to that weird, let's wrap this film up. And it we haven't mentioned that. Robert Mitchum does a great job for the most part of narrating this film. Yeah. But even he can't save that final sequence when he's like, oh, they basically went off and lived happily ever after. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the Magnificent Seventh remake had a terrible final line where the film ends and it basically said, oh, they truly were magnificent. It was like, it's just really, but he's like, there's this line at the end, like Wyatt Earp died in Los Angeles. They've always got to say Los Angeles in 1929. Among the pallbearers at his funeral were early Western Hollywood stars William S. Hart and Tom Mix. Tom Mix wept. I'm like, okay. What am I supposed to take from that? That is the last line of this movie. A actor from 1915 Hollywood cried at a funeral. Okay. I found the end bewildering, if truth be told.
The ending wasn't good. I tell you the other thing I didn't think was good was the whole Wyatt trying to force in his retirement thing. He was doing it a bit too much.
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, oh, we're retired. Oh, I'm going to punch a man, but we're retired. Oh, I'm the sheriff, but we're retired. Like, really, dude? Like, and did you think as well? I love Bill Paxton in most films, but I didn't find his enthusiasm in this film to match his character.
I'm not sure if he was totally believable in this film. His death scene definitely wasn't. As I said, I don't think it helped the way it was shot. I thought it was like even the stuff when Verge was shot just before that. Like it was so needlessly ominous. It was like, there was the thunderstorm. You got the ladies kind of doing the tarot cards. I'm like, okay, yeah, guys, we get it. Something bad's going to happen. Jesus fucking Christ. You don't need to club me round the head with it. And then when he died, it just kind of like the stuff on the when he's on like I don't know if he's on the pool table and they're trying to get the bullet out. I actually found that quite dramatic. But of course, the scene before that, when he gets shot and you have the slow motion, feels clumsy. And then straight after it goes to my least favorite scene in the film, when Wyatt goes out in the rain and literally screams at the sky, why, with blood on his hands. And that really is, like, that is a flat out bad scene. That was
Bowfinger.
It is a little bit Bowfinger. And it's another film we need to do on this podcast, isn't it? It really is.
That scene you said where they're trying to take a bullet out. Now, I think I might be confusing it, but I don't think I am. You want to make tensions rise a bit more, just have a dog barking in the background.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Just somebody shut the dog up, like.
Yeah, it does add to the stress though when everyone's kind of like panicking. You've got a dog and you can imagine just trying to get something done and you're just like, it's just too much. It's too much. I do find it amazing though that we've come this far into the podcast and we haven't mentioned what really should be at least the most famous scene in the film, and that is the shootout at the OK Corral, which kind of largely made his name, I suppose. And that is
so quick in this film. It was like it wasn't needed.
Well, it was. I mean, it has to be dealt with because it is the most arguably.
I get it, but for some reason they kind of brushed over it really quickly.
That's what I thought, because you have the builder, and I do like that sequence, but that's supposed to kind of like build up the legend of Wyatt Earp, but Wyatt Earp doesn't do that much in that sequence. I mean, you have like the walkout, which is very old-fashioned Western again. That whole thing about this, this clash of like old-fashioned Western sensibilities.
All they were missing was the
a little bit. But that is the poster for the film, with those all walking in formation and then go into the shootout. And then it's like they kind of line up. And like I said, it's easy to dismiss it now, but for me personally, at least, it was the first time I'd ever seen on screen the idea that Western shootouts were really clumsy. Because usually you're used to like these dead-eyed gunslingers, and they shoot them, and someone's dead, and that's the end of it. Here, there's no cover between them. They're standing about 3 feet away from each other. They all start shooting. Everybody misses. Fucking loads. Ike, of course, survives again, which by the end is turning into a running joke at that point, which I do quite enjoy. But it is like this really clumsy shootout, and I quite like the fact that they didn't glorify it. And that's taken, again, I'm going to bring up this film again to the next level with Open Range, where you're going to have the big shootout at the end, and you've got the big bad guy. And spoiler alert, of course, Kevin Costner doesn't even wait for the shootout. He just walks straight up to him and shoots him in the head. And that's what, you think there's going to be a big kind of blowout between those two. He just shoots him dead on the spot. And it's like, everyone just kind of looks around like, fuck, all right, this is going off.
And that's what you expect. That's what should happen. This whole just standing for, we're going to wait for the bell to chime, or we're going to wait for... It's like, oh my God. With the way they dramatize that in Westerns and stuff. I don't know if that ever happened, or if you do have basically what you get from, like you said, Open Range, where just shoot the guy. Billy the Kid died because what the fuck was his name? The guy that killed him, I can't remember. Pat something or other. Shot him in the back. Not like they had a shootout, which you would think he shot him in the back.
Well, what I did like is, like, Wyatt Earp isn't, like, he even mentions in the film, like, he had only killed one person before this. And in that sequence, it kind of, again, slightly clumsy, it almost feels like slow motion. But he's like, oh, God, when he realizes, like, this is going to happen. Like, they have that big walkout scene. You think, oh, this is definitely going off. But in their heads, in that moment, he's like, oh, we're going to go and we're going to talk this down.
Yeah.
But when he sees, I think it's, God, what's his name? Thomas Hayden Church character, Billy Clanton, going for his gun. And he has that realization. It's not some like superhero moment. He's like, fuck, this is happening now. So people are going to die. And he probably knows, like, the odds are at least one of his brothers, like, he's standing there with his brothers. Like, some people are going to die here, kind of thing. And obviously people get shot. But I like the fact that it's at least clumsy. But I guess in terms of like storytelling, that the real hero moment in the film, and I'm not sure how you feel about it, is the no scene, when it's like right at the end, when Curly Bill and his bandits of the cowboys have them pinned down, and he just gets up and just starts walking, just no.
Walks into the water. He just no.
Like Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, even Doc Holliday says, it's like, oh, where's Wyatt? He's like, oh, he's off walking on water. One of those. But supposedly that happened. At least that's the story that's told. Like, people supposedly corroborated that he just walked out and started shooting and killed Curly Bill. So I don't know, maybe it did happen, but that felt like the real kind of legend building scene for me, at least.
Yeah. So we've said a lot. The shootout we need to talk about, but before we talk about that shootout, which is the Johnny Ringo, Doc Holliday walking around in circles for 20 fucking minutes.
Oh, dude, I love that
scene. What Val Kilmer does really well is when they first meet, and you got Johnny Ringo trying to show off. Like, Johnny Ringo is educated, but he's a complete bastard. Do you know what I mean? So he's there, he's trying to show off. He does his gun spinning, he does all these tricks. It's great. And then Doc Holliday just looks at me. Doc Holliday knows he's good. Like, he's good. Doc Holliday's good. So he goes, oh, I'm just going to fuck with this guy. So he does it with his little tin cup, which I thought was really good. I thought that was, if you want to get under somebody's skin. So, and then the whole "I'm your Huckleberry" thing is kind of played out. He says it quite a few, because Doc Holliday
and the I'm your you're no Daisy. He says that, like, that Daisy line comes up like 4 times in the film. It totally
kind of gets a bit played out, and then you get that shootout scene, and that shootout scene felt more realistic up to a point, because they're not 13 paces away waiting for they're waiting for the first person to pull.
Yeah, they're not like walking away, turning. They are literally, like you say, they are like 3 feet away from each other.
But my God, and to be fair, I've been in fights as a kid where it took forever because you're waiting for somebody to make the first punch. So you're both just walking around holding your fists up like this. But it just got dragged out on screen. It was like just one of you.
No, it's such a great. I love this. I mean, I got to be honest. Like, and again, speaking to how great Val Kilmer and Doc Holliday in this film, like, we're talking about a movie full of tough guys, full of psychos, none more so than Johnny Ringo. Like, oh, he's got a hole in his heart he can't pull up. And some of the stuff he spouts out, like he actually thinks he's the angel of death. And yet, despite the fact that he's ill, despite the fact that he's pallid, despite the fact he's, almost disabled at times, it's like everyone, including Johnny, is scared of Doc Holliday.
Yeah.
And you can see the only times you want to go for him is when there's that one scene out in the street when he's really drunk. And then at the end, when he's like, he's waiting for Wyatt Earp and he sees, Doc Holliday show up and you see the fear in his eyes straight away. He's like, oh, I was just messing. This fight's not with you. But then, of course, he sees all the sweat on his face and he's like, oh, this guy's fucked. He's like, I can take him now. Honestly, in that moment, the moment when Val Kilmer delivers that wry smile and that line, say when, like the confidence that he delivers that line, I would just be like, no, I was just messing. I'm running off because there's no way he's losing that gunfight.
I'm with you on all of that. I think that is great. Sorry. I am with you on all of that. But I'm not with you on then.
Yeah.
Is the fact that they basically dance in a circle for 10 minutes.
Well, that scene is all build up. Like the actual action is split second and it's done. So the whole scene is the build up.
Yeah, but you don't need a lot of foreplay.
Well, I actually think it's strange that you're picking that out as the issue because I thought if you were going to go after that scene, it's what happens after the shot. Because Michael Biehn will not die. He does the whole thing when he's walking around. And Val Kilmer's going for it. Come on, Johnny. Come on. Come on. He's like, you ain't no Daisy. You ain't no Daisy. And the whole sequence just keeps going. It's one of the more dramatic death sequences I've ever seen.
Who hams up more than him is Jim Carrey in The Mask when he gets shot.
Yeah. He's got, although despite the hamming, I mean, between this and Labyrinth, The Abyss, I'm like, why wasn't Michael Biehn just cinema's Psycho for the next 10 years? He is so fucking good at playing a lunatic. It is one of, I think, cinema's great mysteries, the fact that Michael Biehn wasn't a massive star throughout the entirety of the 90s and the 2000s.
Something happened with that, bless him, because Michael Biehn should have been a bigger star.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But one thing, an issue I did have with this film, and I mentioned the fact that the narrative kind of jumps around. And I think despite the fact that a lot of people consider this movie to be overly long, because it is over 2 hours, despite the fact that it's still 45 minutes shorter than Wyatt Earp, is that I think there's too much in this movie. And it's the whole issue of like the real life narrative pushing up against the kind of the need to keep the narrative moving from a cinematic perspective. And one of my biggest issues was just the additional characters. Like there was like a marshal and I was going to say a president. Like there's two guys there who obviously have like sway in the town. I'm like, that could just be one character. Then towards the end, the whole thing about they're sheriffs and then they become marshals, that isn't explained. Like all of a sudden it's okay for them to kill everyone because they become marshals. That whole move towards them becoming just outright murderers at the end of the film, which happens twice as well. There are two murder montages. They go out, they try and kill everyone. They then have to show up with Curly Bill, and then they just do it all again. It's quite strange that they do that twice. But the whole move from them becoming sheriffs and then becoming marshals, I thought that whole sequence was kind of, well, if nothing else, was extremely rushed. And the whole thing, like, when you think of the cowboys, it was Curly Bill and like 6 of his mates. And then by the end, they're just shooting down what feels like a whole art. Like this film does go, and maybe we can blame the director. It goes a little bit Rambo 2 at the end when they're just fucking killing everyone. It's just nobody's safe.
Just kills a country.
Yeah. They're just creating people to kill for the movie. But that was like I said, I love this film. I love the performances. I love Val Kilmer, obviously. But I did have like really going at this film and not trying to pick it apart, but maybe being a bit more critical. Narratively, this movie is a bit of a mess. There's no two ways about it. But a bit of a shame, but it's so close to being a great movie.
Oh, I'm not denying the fact. Like I said, I'm not as enamored with it as you, but I'm not going to sit around and say it was terrible. It was a decent watch. I enjoyed it. some things made me laugh. The fact that fucking Stephen Lang as Ike just was like gum to your shoe, just could not get rid of him. And
does he almost steal? Are we in agreement here? Does he almost steal the movie? He's so fucking good
every time. Like, and he is that. He is what you would expect, what a Western guy to have been, where it's like he's all tough and he's like. But he's the guy that's sneaking up behind you in the back and shooting.
Oh
you.
Yeah. He's the
Pat
one who
Garrett
just
shot Billy.
Pat Garrett, that was it. Yeah,
but he's the guy sneaking up behind you and shooting you in the back. And then when he's face to face with you, he's on his knees, basically saying, "I'll suck your dick if you don't shoot me." Kind of. Do you know what I mean? And it's just, and yeah, he is just. He does it so well, and I don't know if it's the fact that Stephen Lang has that face, the face that you want to hit.
He does then, that's for sure. But, he plays it so well.
I mean, to be fair, in Avatar back in 2009, you wouldn't want to hit that guy then. That guy was a beast. But
monster, yeah. It's almost hard to believe it's the same guy. Yeah. Because, now you'd be like, if you were hiring Stephen Lang for a Western, he would be the tough guy. 100%. Like when you think of Avatar and what's come since, you're like, well, Stephen Lang is the quintessential older tough guy. Yeah. So you'd never hire him now as Ike. Just not in a million years. But it almost makes it more impressive that it is Stephen Lang, I think.
Do you know who else was in this? I was really I laughed when I saw this. Robert John Burke. You might not know that name.
No.
So he played Frank McClory in this. Mm-hmm. But he was RoboCop in the ill-fated RoboCop 3.
That's why I don't know him. Yeah, that's a tough turn. That is I mean, we mentioned with the RoboCop podcast the importance of having the correct mouth for the role, and he did not have the correct mouth for the role, sadly. Nope.
I mean, I know him from other things, but he was Alex Murphy.
He was the jetpack clad RoboCop from RoboCop 3. That film is horrible. It is fucking horrible.
It isn't the best.
It's not his fault, admittedly. Like he's no Weller, but like the film is just a bad film. Bad.
If Weller's turned around saying I'm not doing number 3, then
and he did number 2, which I know some people have a soft spot for. 2's pretty shit as well. Again, we don't turn this into the RoboCop podcast. Although speaking of other 80s films, the end of this film brought to mind 2 movies. Predator and Buckaroo Banzai. How do we feel about the Buckaroo style ending where there's just lots of walking, where you just have the cast? Like, you just don't get that in movies anymore. The reason I bring up Predator, for those who can't remember, it's a different style of ending, but you have all the killing, you have all the murdering, you actually have like this really like dark denouement at the end of the film where he's just sitting in the helicopter and he's completely beaten and all his friends and soldiers are dead, and then it cuts to them just looking at the camera all doing this really goofy smile, and it's this really strange ending. And Buckaroo Banzai, it feels more in place when they have the music and they have the walk, and if you haven't seen it, it is a masterpiece of cinema. But at least tonally, it feels in place. In this, I don't know, I found it quite strange when they had just everybody walking at the end and, remember, these were the players in the movie. Quite old-fashioned, I guess.
I do love as well. Now I'm going to have to do some sort of mashup of Tombstone guys walking to Buckaroo Banzai's music.
It's hard enough for me not to walk down the street and not just to have the music playing in my head, but then my walk does get quite jaunty if I start playing the music. So you have to be careful with that.
But no, I've always felt that they take you out of whatever the film is trying to deliver to you. Not so much Buckaroo Banzai, because nobody knows what that film was trying to deliver to you. Mm-hmm. But
nobody says that film's insane. So it actually feels it feels like an oddly fitting ending to that film.
Yeah, but that's the thing, which is always weird. And I know maybe in this it was meant to be more of a flashback. We're showing you the hero moment. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But most of these guys are dead. They shouldn't be at the end of the film walking down the street. Like everyone in Predator is dead. There shouldn't be a moment where they're all of a sudden 80s sitcom style smiling at the screen. It just...
Yeah, it almost feels like a kind of, like at the end of movies, you get the, no animals were harmed in the making of this movie. It's almost like no actor was killed in the making of this movie. Like, they died, but they didn't really die. You do understand that, right? No, like Bill Paxton didn't actually get shot in the back and die. Like, he's fine. Look, the credits, it's no problem. Very strange.
We take the piss, not me and you personally, but everybody, of Sean Bean, because Sean Bean dies in every film he's ever in, pretty much.
Yeah.
Bill Paxton does well as well, doesn't he?
He does die in a lot of films, yeah. Not quite. I think because he had maybe that moment when he became like a bigger star. Like, you know, he was the star of Twister. He played a pretty big role. It wasn't a massive role, but he was in Titanic and stuff like that. And obviously in those movies, he didn't die. Whereas I feel like with Sean Bean, he died in the big roles. Like, you know, a lot of people, when they think of Sean Bean now, they think of like the gifts and stuff of Lord of the Rings. Of course, he died moments later. So I think it wasn't just dying a lot. I think it was dying in the right movies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean,
but he does. But that's not to belittle your points at all. Like, Bill Paxton does die in a lot of movies. That's
Bill Paxton is in one of my favorite films. I don't know if it holds up anymore. With Michael Biehn.
What's that?
Navy SEALs.
Oh shit, Navy SEALs! I can totally see the poster. I cannot remember the film, despite the fact that I have
just
seen
remember
it.
Bill Paxton playing the sniper, and I think his name was God.
It had that almost. I think was it an 80s movie, late 80s or early
1990?
Yeah, right on the button, because when I think of that movie, the poster is so early 90s.
Yeah,
like it almost looks like a kind of like a straight to DVD cover, but it was, you know, you take it to the cinema and stuff. But I dread to think how that movie is held up.
Well, we're going to find out, because next week
we're going to find out. I think we've done enough there to cover the movie, unless there's anything else you want to add.
We've done enough there to cover the movie and about 7 other movies for some.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. So we'll go to favorite scene. I think you've already covered yours, but unless you've changed your mind.
No, to be fair, yeah. I mean, you would probably go shootouts or things like that, but I don't know. I was just a huge fan of the brotherly love, the thing. I'm not going to let you do this alone. I thought it was delivered really well, and you could see the emotion in both of their faces doing this, and it's something that I would go. I wouldn't want somebody to just cry at my deathbed, but I mean, if anything, somebody to come to my deathbed and just keep ribbing me. Just keep being like you know, so
well, it's built up throughout. Like, I love one of those sequences earlier when he decides, Doc Hollywood, that he's going to have this like war with the cowboys, and he says to Doc Holliday, because he's not his actual brother, because he obviously, you know, he's there with Virgin Mort, and he says, you know, you don't have to be involved in this. And the way he reacts, like, he looks heartbroken. He's like, that's a hell of a thing to say to me. You know, like, as if, like, I consider myself your brother. And like, how could you not expect me to get involved, kind of thing. And they really have those like quieter moments like throughout the film where, you know, even when Wyatt Earp goes off and he's like, you know, why are you doing this? It's like, it's like, Wyatt Earp is my friend. He's like, well, I've got lots of friends. Like, well, I don't. Like, you know, this is the one guy who puts up with his shit.
Yeah.
And it just means, without like being too heavy-handed throughout the film, when they do have that sequence at the end, like that death sequence, it just, goddamn, it really lands, man. It really lands. I love their relationship in this film. So I think you might have actually won with that one, because, I mean, I feel like I should say like the OK Corral shootout or something. But you're going to be upset with this, but I actually think it's the Ringo and Doc Holliday shootout at the end of the film. I love that sequence.
Like, I haven't got a problem with that shootout.
I
don't have a problem with it.
It's just drawn out.
With it being drawn out. That's the only thing I have with it. The build up to it, the look on the face, like the way you described it was beautiful. Like where he sees the sweat on his face and Ringo thinks, "Oh, I can do this," but then you see that wry smile, and like Doc Holliday is not going down without a fight. And but the fact then that it gets a little bit drawn out is what gets it to me. But I can't take away from you that being a great scene. I can't do it.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch of great scenes, but like one thing I confirm, whatever scene I was picking, it's one that Val Kilmer's in. No doubt. I think he's just the best. In terms of loves and hates, loves, number 1, with a bullet, unsurprisingly, Val Kilmer. 2, another one you've picked out issue with, facial hair. Sam Elliott and Kurt Russell in particular, God bless them. I mean, Kurt Russell, I don't think anyone could beat Sam Elliott for just a mustache, like anyone in the world. Kurt Russell's facial fuzz in like the last 30 years has been pretty impressive on a consistent basis, but he is going up against the mask there. And number 3 is that relationship between Doc and Wyatt, which I think really is the true love story of this film.
Yeah. Do you know what? I might have been a bit harsh saying Val Kilmer kind of did. Like, you've kind of sold me on him a little bit. I'm not saying he's in my favourites.
Yeah.
I may have been a bit harsh at the beginning to say...
I like. Well, that's the thing. We can have these conversations, talk each other around. That's what it's all about.
You might have sold me on it. Number 1, I've already said it. The relationship between Kurt and Val. Again, you said I had issue with the mustaches. I didn't have issue with the mustaches. I just said it felt like a porno.
A porno. Fair enough. My apologies.
But you can never beat Sam Elliott's mustache. That dude is. No. But randomly, Ike Clanton.
That's a great shout
in this.
But he would probably be my number 4.
What was that when they first meet? When Curly Bill comes up with Ike Clanton, and for some reason we say about things just being overdone in this film, like I'm your Huckleberry Daisy and all. I don't know how many times Ike Clanton called Wyatt Earp Law Dog. Law Dog, we're gonna do this, Law Dog. Like, all right, calm down.
It's just the way he keeps going, but like almost like in the moment. Like he goes from being tough when he feels safe, but the moment he feels like he's under threat, how quickly his face turns. It's like when they've got Wyatt Earp surrounded, when he's got Curly Bill by the collar, and he's like, he's going to be arrested. And he's like, oh, there's all of us. And as soon as he puts the gun in his head, he's like, oh, they might rush me, but you die first. And he immediately like, whoa, he'll do it. He's not lying. He immediately turns into a pussy. But then 2 minutes later, as soon as the gun's not in his head again, he's talking shit. And everyone knows a guy like that who's like, he talks a good game as long as he feels safe, as long as he's got the numbers kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he's just despicable in all the best ways in this film.
And my third is it doesn't follow the traditional Westerns where we're going to meet at high noon and we're going to wait forever and we're going to do this. And like you said, in the OK Corral, I mean, they probably wasted so many bullets shooting the sides of barns than they did hitting each other. So the way it was in regards, it wasn't an action set piece. It was just a bunch of guys who looked like they haven't handled guns properly.
Yeah. Well, as I said, like, Wyatt Earp, the only person who really looked like a killer, and it's all the way throughout, the real killer is Doc Holliday and Johnny Ringo.
Yeah.
They look like the only true, like, kind of genuinely skilled people. The other ones all look like psychos and characters and stuff. But you even see with like Curly Bill at the end when he's trying to kill Wyatt Earp when he just walks out, he keeps missing him. If Johnny Ringo's there, he doesn't miss him. He's cool as ice. He just fucking kills him on the spot. Yeah. But
So they were my 3.
Okay, hates number 1. Charlton Heston's cameo falls completely flat. Feels absolutely pointless. If you're gonna have Charlton Heston, the scene has to land, and it absolutely doesn't. The fact that the film is narratively messy, which of course might be linked to the fact that the Charlton Heston sequences don't feel like they belong. If they were, like you said, they were filmed by the original director, he might not have wanted the original shot footage in his film, but you can't just go cutting Charlton Heston out of your fucking film. No. Like, you can't be doing that. So you stuck with these weird Charlton Heston sequences, which really, when the way they're edited into the film, they're not done with any love. It just kind of happens, sadly. And I've mentioned it a few times, but Wyatt and Josephine, both, the sequences when on the horses feels cheesy. The bit at the end is easily my least favorite film, especially coming after, if you had just ended with Wyatt walking away from Doc and Doc dying in the bed. Oh, again, I get like this film is trying to be a bit more quote unquote popcorny. So you need that happy ending, but it really feels tacked on. So, and I also don't think the actress, I don't want to be too mean, but Dana Delaney, and she hasn't got a great deal to work with. I don't think she's fantastic in this film. And it's a bit of a shame. Same with Paula Malcolmson as Ali. I don't actually think she's brilliant. And that sounds totally sexist because I've just kind of listed for the past hour why all the dudes in this film are amazing. But I think a big part of that is that the female characters are given short shrift, sadly.
I think it is going to become a little bit sexist, isn't it? Because it was a male-heavy time and a male-centric film. So they brought in these women to just sit on the sidelines, fan yourself, and don't speak kind of thing. And they've done what they've been told, and it falls short for them. I totally agree with that. Yeah. Everything, like they tried to then shoehorn in some sort of love story, but they shoehorned it in. They didn't spend any time on it. Like you said, I totally agree that unfortunately, but they've made it sexist. We haven't made it sexist by saying it. They've made it sexist by the way they've tackled it.
Yeah. Well, it is one of those things as well. I think it's one of those. She isn't giving enough, like Josephine's character in particular, isn't given enough screen time. The sequences that she's in prevalently, should we say, are some of the weakest moments of the film. And I just think for those to work, you need a really, really strong actress. Like, if you have maybe Sigourney Weaver, just because I mentioned that because, again, we did Galaxy Quest last week. Does it work? Is it better? Almost certainly. But yeah, like I said, I don't want to pick too much on the actress because I don't think it's her fault. Those scenes in particular are just the weakest elements. The way they're written, the way they feel like they're really forced into this film. And as we mentioned earlier, let's be clear, the true love story, again, is Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. It's not between Josephine and Wyatt.
I'm wondering if it's a trope of the director mind, because I think about it in Cobra, and the female characters in Cobra were not the best either.
Not great in Rambo 2 either.
No.
Not great in Rambo 2.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, she's kind of shoehorned in and then quickly killed.
Yeah.
Like, she's basically there to give him a necklace. That's about it. But hey ho. In terms of,
I haven't done my
sorry. Oh, I do apologize. Sorry.
We're just talking forever. But it's not going to be much of a difference, really. Charlton Heston, you could definitely feel the tonal shift between directors. It wasn't necessary, but like you said, you have Charlton Heston in your film. You're going to keep him whether or not.
Yeah, whether it works or not, you can't just go dropping Charlton Heston at your film. Yeah, totally.
Wasn't a huge fan of Powers Booth. We haven't mentioned him much as Curly Bill, but I wasn't a huge fan of him. I didn't think he gave anything.
What it reminded me of was almost like Lethal Weapon, when you had was it not the Colonel? Was it the Colonel? And then you had
the Colonel, and then you had Gary Busey.
Yeah, like he feels like the Colonel. Like, don't get me wrong, he leaves more of an impression than the Colonel, but the real bad guy is Johnny Ringo, or like the Gary Busey equivalent kind of thing. So I feel like he suffers from a similar kind of role where he kind of runs his mouth a little bit, but all the threat comes from Johnny Ringo.
Yeah, and the other one then. Some of the lines in this film, just like the whole skin that smoke wagon thing, and
love that line.
Maybe that's how they talk back then. It just
maybe
it didn't sit right for me. What the fuck?
Well, it's amazing. You pick it as like your least favorite line, and I'm like, I picked it for the quote at the start of the film.
What the fuck is a smoke wagon?
Smoke wagon's just a gun. It's such a cool way to say a gun. Skin that smoke wagon and see what happens. If he said skin that gun and or pull that gun,
but you wouldn't say skin. Shoot the trigger. Pull the trigger.
Shoot the trigger. What a terrible example. Shoot the trigger. Shoot it.
I had it in my mind. Shoot the glass. Pull the trigger.
Shoots the glass. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. Moving on.
Do you want to do facts next? Facts.
Let's do because I found a couple. Let's do alternate titles in different.
Oh, cool.
So, I said last week we're only going to do this if there's ones that.
Well, I didn't even think there would be because it's called Tombstone. I'm like, what would it be called? Tombstone,
I thought that. Yeah, I thought Tombstone is just going to be Tombstone, but no, a couple of countries haven't let us down.
Oh, brilliant.
Okay, so I'm going to go with some of the easier ones, and I'll go into some of my favorites. Brazil, Tombstone, Justice is Coming.
Okay.
Croatia, legendary tombstones.
Oh, that doesn't work at all.
No. Finland, a town called Tombstone.
That's fine.
Hungary, Tombstone, Dead City.
Oh, that's terrible.
Russia, Tombstone, Legend of the Wild West.
Acceptable.
Yeah. Now we come to some of my favorites. French Canada, Dueling in the Sun.
Oh, that's really bad.
Yeah. Mexico, The Avengers.
Okay, well, that's going to cause an issue for 20 years down the line.
Turkey, The Honor of the Town.
No, I don't like that.
Taiwan, Terminator.
What the fuck?
Some of these translations might not be right, but yeah.
I hope it is just Terminator. Okay, fair enough.
In regards to what the fuck moments, top of the list, Greece hasn't let me down at all. Clash in the Green Swamp.
What the fuck? It's got to be a weird translation thing. That's one of those things when you put it through a translator, it comes up with absolute madness. Clash in the Green. I guess maybe somebody who's just seen that one sequence, the sequence when he kills Curly Bill, and you could maybe argue because there's water there, it's like, but it's not a swamp. That's a jump. That's the only thing. I mean, if I'm giving the benefit, but I'm not giving the benefit because that is fucking insane.
Imagine on a Saturday night, dude, do you want to go see Clash in the Green Swamp?
What's that about? That's a Western. Oh, okay. Is there a swamp in it? No. Is there a clash? Well, there is a clash. I'll give you that. So.
It's about a guy in Wyatt Earp, named Wyatt Earp in the town called Tombstone. Why didn't they call it Tombstone or Wyatt Earp? No. Clash in the Green Swamp.
Okay, fair enough. Jesus Christ. That is impressive. I didn't think there was going to be anything that good, but
no.
Do you have any facts? The only one I've got is, you talk about this film, like, why is the emphasis on Wyatt Earp? And, he's got his own, there's a whole other movie where it's just Wyatt Earp. What about his brothers? Well, supposedly a big part of that, in terms of his legend being built up, he did it himself beyond the books. And there is a nod to it at the end of the film where he writes, My Friend Doc Holliday. So they add all those, those kind of serials which were written back in the day. But he actually headed over to Hollywood. I mean, we mentioned the terrible denouement with, the early Western stars being his pallbearers. The reason they were, it wasn't just because he was this famous, cowboy or whatever you want to call him, lawman from the 19th century. It's because he actually worked in Hollywood. He came to Hollywood in 1915 and actually worked on early Western films. So he was able to go around and actually, of course, all these people acting in Westerns then would be like, well, what was it like? What did you do? So he was literally able to build his own Hollywood legend on the lots of these movies, which I thought was absolutely amazing.
No, it's really.
Because you almost think of them as being two completely different times, and they were. But the late 19th century, it was like, obviously he was an older man, but he lived long enough to actually go to Hollywood and work on these movies, which seems insane to me. But it makes sense.
Right. So I got a few. So Doc Holliday's wink to Billy Clampton just before the culmination of the OK Corral gunfight was completely improvised by Val Kilmer.
Mm-hmm.
Some years after the death of Doc Holliday, Wyatt was quoted in an interview as saying Doc was a dentist, not a lawman or an assassin, whom necessity had made a gambler, a gentleman whom disease had made a frontier vagabond, a philosopher whom life had made a caustic wit, a long, lean, ash-blonde fellow nearly dead with consumption, and at the same time, the most skillful gambler and the nerviest, speediest, deadliest man with a six-gun that I ever knew. Why is none of that in the film? Why have you got that, which is beautiful and so elegant, and then you get skin that smoke wagon?
You keep going after one of my favorite lines. You're not going to get any joy out of me, buddy.
So we said about Wyatt Earp playing Billy Claiborne. He's Wyatt Earp's fifth cousin.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Val Kilmer practiced for a long time on his quick draw speed and gave his character a southern aristocratic accent. The southern accent is an authentic touch, as Holliday was a cousin, several generations removed, of Margaret Mitchell, author of Gone with the Wind.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I actually think he takes it right up to the limit in terms of like those affectations he adds to the character. And it's a fine line between being memorable and being kind of cartoonish. But I think he walks right up to that line and stops in the right location. Put it that way.
Yeah. So Wyatt Earp died in 1929, having never been so much as scratched by a single bullet. The fact his name is known above, for instance, Virgil's, the Marshal of Tombstone at the time of the famous gunfight, is largely due to Wyatt's self-promotion. Before his death, he walked in Hollywood circles, and John Wayne once claimed to have met him, apparently modelling his famous walk on that of Wyatt Earp.
That's cool.
Yeah. George P. Cosmatos liked that in the script, the gunfight at OK Corral wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning of something.
Well, that is something. I mean, usually that would be the end of a film in traditional kind of storytelling, but it is literally the midpoint. And it is almost like you have two different movies. You have that kind of more character-led first half, and then everything after that does turn into a more kind of violent, traditional Western. I actually prefer the first half of the film, personally, to the second half. I think everything after that becomes a little bit messier, but it's still a great scene.
Willem Dafoe was the original choice to play Doc Holliday, but Buena Vista refused to distribute the film if he was cast due to Dafoe's role in the controversial The Last Temptation of Christ.
It's crazy, isn't it? That like he was like on this like blacklist for a few years because of his part of playing Jesus.
It was Val Kilmer's idea to whistle on the way to the OK Corral. Harry Carey Jr. was 62 when he played Marshal Fred White, who died at 31.
Yeah, and he looks everyone. And the thing is, he was 62. He looked about 76.
Some of our best episodes of the podcast is when I've had a few too much to drink. I argue that fact, right? The reason why I say that is because George Cosmatos claimed that Stephen Lang was drunk for most of filming.
I can believe that. I can totally believe that. He always looks pissed. And again, in a movie where you've got these rough and ready cowboys, he always looks filthier and grosser than anyone else. Like he just even there's a sequence like just before the OK Corral shootout. They actually make a point. It's like, we'll catch them when their hangovers are kicking in. And you go to that sequence, and Stephen Lang's got his head, very traditional Western kind of motif, where he's got his head in a barrel full of water, and he's pulling it out. And even like covered in water, he somehow still looks filthy. I'm just like, oh my! Like there were moments in that film I was just I'd just be happy if he had a shower. I don't want to watch him have a shower. I just like to know that he was having a shower. He's distractingly dirty and sweaty throughout this movie.
He is a greasy man.
Yeah, that is the right way to put it. He is a greasy man for sure.
During the famous gunfight, members of the two opposing parties were initially only about 6 feet apart, and about 30 shots were fired in 30 seconds.
Yeah. Well, I love the manic elements of that, and as I said, for me at least, it was the first time I saw that on film, because I always thought of it as being these super quick sharpshooters who would just kind of take guys out with one bullet, and then you got all these guys there, and it's all like the major players, and they just can't hit shit. It's amazing. It's just kind of like organized panic almost. It's like who can be the coolest in a panicky situation.
So I'm just going to do one more because this made me laugh. When Virgil returns to the saloon and collapses after being shot, Kurt Russell accidentally bangs Sam Elliott's head on the bar as he lifts him to lay him flat on the floor.
He's a big guy. He's a big
big dude. Just smacked his head on the... Just gave him...
I don't want to be lifting fucking Sam Elliott. Jesus Christ. In terms of legacy, we've mentioned a lot of this. I mean, I think it's got one of the best casts of the 90s. I think, there's an argument to be made as to the overall quality of the film, but as to the quality of the cast, I think that is largely undeniable. Yeah. It was famously mismanaged. The fact that it even made it out ahead of White Earp feels like a bit of a miracle. It is one of the more modern, one of the more successful modern day westerns, certainly more so than White Earp. It wasn't like a massive hit, but it was a hit, Yeah. And I think back then in particular, there was no guarantee that westerns would be a hit, which kind of lives on today. It's like the westerns back in the reason they lived on for so long is that they were easy to make, and they were, they were often hits. They're quick to, kind of like a modern day horror movie would be, I guess, the most obvious comparison. Yeah. That you can make them at a lower budget. They tend to make a decent bank. So they kind of kept going for years and years, but it was really Unforgiven, I guess, which kind of put them back on the map in the early 90s. Again, one of the famous cinematic double acts we mentioned earlier in the film, Armageddon, Deep Impact, there was this and White Earp. There was just like a bunch of them for a few years, and this is definitely one of the more famous ones. Yeah. And I know you have your issues with him, but I think for a lot of people, when they think of this film, they think of Val Kilmer.
Absolutely. Have you seen the Val Kilmer documentary, Val?
I haven't seen it yet, no. So
it's really good. Watch that documentary. But there's a part in it where they have I think it was where Tombstone was. To where Tombstone was. They have actual the Tombstone marathon where they have the film, and Val Kilmer goes as well. And every time, and they're all quoting the lines of the film where they're watching it on the side of a van and things. Really good. They love it, and it's all like. And I'm probably one of the only ones who wouldn't rate his performance as well as everyone else has.
Yeah, because I wondered, like, generally speaking, how highly it's kind of considered amongst his performances. Because again, like Val Kilmer's almost had a bit of a weird career because, his reputation on set and the fact that his bigger movies, like he had that shot, didn't he, where he was the Saint, he was Batman. There was The Island of Dr. Moreau, which was a famous disaster. Yeah. But, he had that opportunity there for a few years to be like the next big Hollywood star, and it didn't quite work out. And we've mentioned before that if you've got this kind of attitude, you can get away, or you used to be able to get away with it in Hollywood, as long as the hits and as long as the money kept coming in. But as soon as the money stopped coming in, if you've got that attitude, you can be swept to the side very quickly. And that kind of happens to Val Kilmer. But I think a lot of people forget he's actually a fantastic actor. And this is definitely one of his more memorable performances, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of the score, it's a bit of a weird one because it's by Bruce Broughton, who's super eclectic across like numerous fields. Like he's done video games, TV, the full works. He did the Lost Space movie. Remember the one with Matt LeBlanc from like '96?
Lost in Space.
Lost in Space, yeah. Again, that's kind of what I'm not sure if I want to watch the whole film. I wouldn't mind, like, if it was on TV, I'd happily watch 30 minutes of it to see if it holds up in any way. Not that it was great in '96 either. It's not going to hold up, is it? He did Bambi 2. He did Monster Squad, a movie we have covered on this podcast. Yeah. But this is a very traditional Western score. I actually think sometimes it's a bit too traditional. Like, in and of itself, it's very good, but I do think sometimes it clashes against the inconsistent tone of the movie. And sometimes, I mentioned the fact that moments of this film can feel a little bit heavy-handed, and I think a part of that is the way the score is implemented. Not an issue with the score, but certainly the way it's implemented. But I had quite mixed feelings about the score, truth be told. In terms of video games, I mean, surely we're going to both come up with the same one, right?
It's Red Dead, isn't it?
Of course it's Red Dead. Of course. The only thing I'd say is, if you're going to do this movie as a Red Dead game, the first half of this movie would be like the first hour of the game. Yeah. Like, that kind of narrative thing, that would all get told in the first 60 minutes of the game. And then the next hour of this film would be the next 60 hours of the video game as you're chasing down the cowboys. Yeah. It totally would be, wouldn't it?
The only other one I would say was a bit different would be, do you remember Gun in 2005.
Yeah, I quite like Gun.
Yeah, Gun was great. I thought that was really
good. It was one of those like cross-generational titles. It came out on the original Xbox and then was kind of re-released on the Xbox 360 alongside other classics as Peter Jackson's King Kong. It was in that kind of era. But yeah, I remember liking that game. The only problem is now, of course, is that Red Dead Redemption's ultimately blown out of the water.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, I just had to mention Gun. I had to bring some.
Oh, of course, and maybe it's a bit more realistic because that film was made on a more. It was still a pretty big game, but obviously it didn't have the budget of Red Dead. I mean, very few games do. So maybe if we wanted a Tombstone game, that's a more realistic kind of counterpart, I suppose.
Yeah, but it'd be Red Dead, wouldn't it?
It would be Red Dead. It would absolutely be Red Dead. Hopefully, the first Red Dead, not the second one. Actually, having watched this film, it made me decide to give Red Dead Redemption 2 one last go, because Red Dead Redemption 1 is one of my favorite games of all time. And Red Dead 2, like, there's great stuff in that game. There is a great game in there, but they're so up their own ass that they kind of forget that people actually have to play this game. And I just kept running into moments. So I was like, it just has no respect for my time whatsoever. But I've decided this is it. I've downloaded it again, installed it, whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to give it one last bash, and you can blame Tombstone. So I'll report back on that next week to let you know.
Let me know how you feel.
Did you play Red Dead 2?
I did, yeah. I didn't have I played it forever. It was all right, but I had more feelings for Red Dead 1 than I did Red Dead 2. Yeah,
that's what I thought. But like I said, I'll give it one more bash, but I think I might just have to start on the fact that I loved because Red Dead 1 is one of my favorite games of all time. And I was so looking forward to Red Dead 2. And I remember like got about 10, 15 hours in, I was just like, is this a bit boring? I think it might be, but never mind. It is what it is. So yeah, that's Tombstone. Now we'll get to the interesting point of scores and recommendations. I'll go first because it'll be much more obvious. The score is 4. I actually think at times this might be a 3-star film, but it's elevated by a 5-star cast. So I'm going to settle on this being a 4-star movie. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. I think it's actually really easy to recommend in a way that, say, something like Wyatt Earp isn't, because despite the fact that it's a little over 2 hours and despite its faults, the one thing it always is fun. It's like the interactions between the characters, the action sequences, it's just got a propulsion to it. So it took I've seen this film like 15 times, and it was only this time that I really started picking holes in it. If you just let this film wash over you, it's so fun that it's easy to actually ignore the faults. So yes, I would recommend this to people. I have recommended this to people, and it's a 4-star film.
Cool. I would recommend it to people. It's got an all-star cast. It's got a pretty easy storyline to follow. It's interesting. It's a nice watch, but it's a 3.
That's fair enough.
It's middle of the road. It's not terrible. It's not fantastic in my opinion, but it is a 3. I would watch it again. I've watched it previously. I would watch it again. So,
well, you're not out of if you actually go back and look at the reviews for this. On Metacritic, it is 50 on the nose.
Yeah.
There are people who really like it. There are people who aren't so fussed. There are people who are right down the middle. It really did kind of the full spectrum of reviews. I don't think anyone said it was flat out terrible, but then I don't think anyone said it was a masterpiece either. So it's a 50. I think Rotten Tomatoes, it's 70% fresh, which feels about right. I think it's more liked by the general public. I think it's 7.8 on IMDb or something. But your opinion does fall in line with the critical response at the time, at least, that it's a decent, borderline good film, but one with faults. And it's just a matter of how much do you put on the performances against how much do you, how much do those issues kind of chip away at you? So yeah, I don't think 3-star is an egregious response to this film at all.
Cool. I'm glad I could suffice you for this one.
Suffice you. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I know where you're getting at. So what are we going for next week? It has to be your choice. I obviously chose Tombstone.
Yeah. So I was just looking at the director of next week's film, and he's done some. So Peter Hyams, he did Outland, The Presidio.
Everyone's like, oh yeah, Peter Hyams. I don't know the fucking Peter Hyams.
No. You will know. He did Outland with Sean Connery, the one set in space. He did
only you would say that with that much confidence. Dude, he did Outland with Sean Connery. You know, if we did the game Pointless and they said name a Sean Connery film, that is coming up with 0. That is coming with fucking 0. Unless they ask you and you're the one person who Outland with Sean Connery. It was you.
He did the Presidio. He did Time Cop, Sudden Death, The Relic.
Yeah, I do know those.
Yeah. End of Days.
Yeah, I've seen all those films in fairness. And in fairness, I have seen the Sean Connery film as well, but I just thought it was the confidence you said it everyone knows that film.
If nobody knows it, don't talk to me. I'm just saying.
Again, like I said, that is a perfect example, like those weird directors where I've seen every single one of those films, and yet I'd never heard of the director.
Well, Peter Hyams has done. He's had a mixed bag, should we say?
Oh yeah,
yeah. But of all of those, we're gonna do Stay Tuned. I've mentioned it before on this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that is an interesting choice. I actually quite like what was the Schwarzenegger one he did the day after End of Days. Actually, I have a bit of a soft spot for that film. But
yeah, I don't mind End of Days. I think it's all right.
Yeah.
I don't mind Time Cop. I don't mind Sudden Death. I think
they're all pretty decent. But yeah, of course you're not picking any of those.
No, we'll do a Stay Tuned. So it's about John Ritter, who plays a guy named Roy, who gets sucked into his TV screen by the devil, and he's got a.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we'll leave it there. I mean,
just leave it there. So
I think I sold it.
Stay tuned. If you haven't seen it by now, surely you want to see it. I mean, who wouldn't? So yeah, would he recommend it? He obviously is. So yes, next week we're doing Stay Fucking Tuned.
Yeah. I need to caveat this with the fact I've seen this once before. So
do you know, this is one of those films where I literally can't remember if I've seen it. I know the premise. I know and I can see the poster, and I'm like, I can't quite remember if I've seen either the trailer or if I've actually watched the entire film when I was younger. So I guess I'm going to find out in the next couple of days.
So I'm not sure if this holds up. Probably doesn't, but
that'll be fun revisiting it though.
I love bringing these random ones into revisit. We've got all these big budget ones. We've got all these, and I know every now and then you've got this random one that people go, "Why the fuck would you watch that? Why wouldn't you watch that?"
Well, exactly. Just to be clear, we're obviously in the run-up now to episode 100. And this is like, we've got some big hitters coming in the build-up and following 100 as well. We've got like the next 5 or 6 lined up, I think. But yeah, this is the last of the weird ones before we pass the 100. But
is it really though?
Is it? Well, is it weird, or is it the only weird one?
I don't think it's the last of the weird ones. I'm pretty
no, there is one weird one, isn't there? There is one weird one. Although I'll justify that one. Anyway, we're going to peace. Please join us next week for that fucking movie. But thank you for joining us for Tombstone. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. I'm your Huckleberry.
Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing. Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers, Darry.
Yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.